Oh, wait a second. No, I meant this kind of clubbing. Hey, Sleepy Sheepy here. Today we're going to be looking at a level 100 strength build using the Great Club as well as dual heavy stone clubs. We'll be using a rickety shield in our offhand for parries, and we'll also be using the claw talisman to enhance our jumping attacks. Everything else is going to be set up to ensure that we're pretty tanky, so that means the Great Helm, Banished Knight Armor, Bullgoat Gauntlets, Tree Sentinel Greaves, Bullgoat Talisman, Great Jar's Arsenal, and Crimson Amber Medallion. So these things are all going to boost our HP, equip load, and poise, and that's going to net us 101 poise. Because this showcase is going to specifically be about 2v2s in the arena, we're going to be using the Crimson Whirl Bubble Tier as well as the Crimson Bubble Tier. These two are both really nice tiers to have in the arena because you can definitely take damage pretty quickly on spawn, and having the Crimson Whirl Bubble Tier is going to be a great way to start a fight, and then the Crimson Bubble Tier is also going to be a nice way to get a little HP back, since if you're alive for a long time, you can run out of flasks. The moveset for this build is going to be a lot of big, heavy, slow attacks with the Great Club, and then a lot of quick attacks with the dual stone club setup. So the just regular light attacks are pretty slow, but they're not bad. It's definitely possible to roll catch. You also have crouching attacks, which come out a little bit faster, but lack range. I really enjoyed the heavy attacks. They definitely could throw your opponents off. You could kind of bait your opponent to come in for you, and you do get a little bit of hyper armor for them. So definitely a nice option there and a good way to mix things up. And then the jumping attacks are also pretty strong. Jumping heavies are probably going to be your best bet, just because jumping light attacks don't have that much of a wider sweep, but will do less damage. So that's going to be kind of my general recommendation there. And then as for the stone club, these are going to come out really, really fast. So they have a fair bit of range as well, and I just found you could frequently hit people twice in a row with them. So the light attacks are going to be great. You're going to have backstep attacks that aren't too bad either. Heavy attack is good for a nice mix-up, but it doesn't have a ton of range. And then we'll also be using Flaming Strike on one, and then on the other we'll go ahead and use the Thunderbolt, and that's going to be a great way to just have a ranged option that we can switch to if somebody's running away and is low on health. That pretty much covers everything that I wanted to say about the build and the moveset. I also wanted to mention that Iced Estus was a huge part in making this particular showcase possible. 2v2s are something I haven't done a ton of, so having a person who is willing to, use a similar build as me and just kind of go into the arena and have some fun was amazing. Ice does a lot of really funny content. He's an extremely skilled player that brings a lot of humor and kind of levity to Elden Ring in general, so I would definitely recommend his channel, and I'll be putting a link to it in the description and on the video. And yeah, the only other thing I wanted to mention, if you wouldn't mind considering subscribing, that would be awesome. This content is a little bit different than my normal flow, but I just had so much fun, and I hope you enjoy it. Alright, so jumping into our first 2v2, we have Iced Estus and myself going against a player with Giant Hunt on the Knight Rider Glaive, as well as a player with Mirai's Greatsword. And they're not really set up to be taking advantage of the successive attacks that you can get with Mirai's Greatsword. They do land the occasional Ash of War on us, but it doesn't absolutely blender us like it potentially could. So that's something to be aware of. They weren't super optimized. I mean, they weren't using great clubs, so probably a little bit more optimized than us, but the whole stat allocation and talisman allocation probably could have been different. And I think if you're going to be using Mirai's Greatsword, it's really important to kind of focus your whole build around ensuring you get some high damage out of that. So we do see that player switch to the Lance with Royal Knight Resolve, and that definitely has the potential for a very high output. They do manage to hit me with it with one R1, but then I managed to trade into it with an attack with the Great Club. And they start going for jumping attacks maybe a little bit too frequently. Here I'm able to just kind of get a backstab on the kind of delayed recovery time that comes with the jumping attack with the Lance, and I think we will see that player kind of switch up their approach from the Lance to something else later on after I've landed that backstab. So that can definitely be a nice aspect of delivering critical attacks, is it may make your opponent kind of second guess their play style. So once that happens, I come over to help Ice, and he manages to land a really nice pot throw to get the kill, and then manages to land a backstab on the Mariah's Greatsword player. So Ice is very good with his crits, and that makes it very nice to just kind of, you know, keep a player occupied for a second as well as deliver a lot of burst damage. So I think, you know, when you're running builds that are not optimized for meta, you're probably going to want to have teammates that are definitely going to be somebody you can rely on. So I think we both did a good job of just kind of having a give and take with our opponents, and we both kind of stay focused on one opponent at a time until the other opponent died. So then we would just kind of 2v1 whoever was left. We both have fairly aggressive play styles, which kind of complement each other. It means that neither player is left on their own too often. And here I'm able to get a quick backstab just on Giant Hunt, and I think that was a pretty predictable move that that player was using with the Knight Rider Glaive. Just too many Giant Hunts, too much Ash of War became obvious when they were going to go for it, and we could kind of punish that with either backstab or parries, or just, you know, landing a jumping heavy at the end of that attack. So they kind of got into a bad rhythm here where one was dying before the other was being able to respawn, and that was pretty detrimental, I think, to just kind of the general kill count. And it wasn't something we were like trying to set up on purpose, but I think when you are playing aggressively and you do have the potential to land big burst damage, either with, you know, a great club or a parry or a backstab, it can be hard to stay alive with that type of pressure. So I think that was kind of a very successful technique that we applied there, was just continuously applying pressure throughout the duration of this fight. And here the player with the Mariah's Greatsword at the beginning of the fight has now switched to dual straight swords, which is a little bit of a stronger setup. I definitely can't fault them for that. You know, trying to change your strategy when you feel like something isn't working makes sense. But here we can see the player with the Knight Rider Glaive has not changed their strategy. It's also worth noting that I am able to poise break them out of that kind of initial windup. And that's going to be pretty useful. Just in general, like, to be aware of when you can poise break your opponent is pretty helpful. So I've switched over to the Stone Club, and you can see how it kind of complements the rhythm that comes with the Great Club that Iced is using. And you'll see that a lot throughout the course of our invasions, or 2v1s rather, where he'll be able to deliver, you know, a jumping attack with the Great Club, and then I'll be able to follow it up with maybe another poise break or stun lock to allow for further attacks or roll catches with the Great Club again. So it can be a really kind of deadly sequence of stun locks to experience. There, our opponent does a nice job of switching focus over to Iced and kind of getting part of that Ash of War off. I think that was definitely a smart play on their part, but we are continuing to apply pressure. I'm trying to make sure they don't have too much room, and here they go for a heal. I think they were going to be a little bit more passive, but they start playing aggressively and nearly kill me while I weapon swap over to my Stone Club with Thunderbolt. But ultimately the time does run out, and we do manage to get the win with 11 kills. Next up, we have another 2v2, and this is going to be against a player with a Winged Scythe and then the Bloodhound Fang. So the player with Bloodhound Fang is definitely a little bit of somebody to worry about. That Ash of War that frequently you see with the Bloodhound Fang a lot is you know, potentially pretty damaging. So it's predictable, but has the option for high damage output. So we're gonna be trying to pay attention to that. And here the Winged Scythe user is really going for their Ash of War quite frequently, and that's something that's pretty useful in invasions, but in the context of a 2v1, I don't think it's really the right play, because you don't have that many flasks, and losing your ability to heal is probably the biggest benefit of that particular Ash of War. And eventually Ice and I managed to get both kills and just kind of reset things to neutral here. He did a good job of kind of continuing the pressure as I was going for some slow attacks. So next up we have this kind of back and forth with the Bloodhound Fang user, and here they do manage to land their Ash of War on me. I was kind of anticipating that I'd be able to go in for a backstab there, and wasn't able to. So I do get a punish on their buff when they apply that to their weapon. I go for a quick parry there, and then here, that was kind of another backstab attempt that didn't work out in my favor, but Bloodhound Fang is very susceptible to backstab, so you'll see me continuing to try and grab those as time goes on. So I'm low on health, so I switch over to Giant Land, and that does end up actually killing that opponent. Giant Land is not a great Ash of War, and it's the only one that you can apply to the Great Club, so that's one of the reasons that it's a pretty off-meta weapon. I mean, it's a colossal weapon, which means it's big and slow, and isn't likely going to land as frequently as, you know, something like Dual Spears, and it also is not able to take on unique Ashes of War, so that is kind of another reason it's a struggle, and also part of the reason that I included Stone Clubs as well. One, I think having a weapon that's a little bit faster is really nice, and two, having some unique Ashes of War available to you are going to be pretty beneficial in applying additional pressure in the arena. So here I do finally get a backstab on that Ash of War, and that's enough to finish off that opponent, and now it's kind of a 2v1 situation, and I'm able to just come in with a jumping attack while the Winged Scythe user goes for their Ash of War, and then Ice just grabs a quick backstab. The Bloodhound Fang user is doing actually a pretty good job of kind of spamming R01s in an effective way where he's switching opponents and just kind of making his attacks a little bit unpredictable. So here I did go for another backstab attempt, anticipating their follow-up attack with the Ash of War, but they didn't go for it, so kind of had no dice there. But next we do kind of get some switching of opponents. I go for a jumping attack on the Winged Scythe user, and it's not effective, but it does kind of, you know, apply additional pressure, and they may not, you know who to attack at that moment. So it can be a way to just kind of vary up your kind of tactics and psych your opponents out a little bit. And Iced has managed to kill the player with the Winged Scythe, so it does go back to a 2v1 for a moment, but that player does spawn back in. So here I go for just a charged heavy attack, and the charged heavy attack on the Great Club I found to be a lot of fun. You could, you know, deliver quite a bit of damage with it, and it was just kind of slow enough where I think your opponents would think that you've already attacked at that moment, but you know, you're still charging it, so they'll come in for an attack, and then you'll bring down the Great Club and just deliver a ton of damage. So you know, I tried to mix that up. I definitely enjoyed that as a follow-up to the light attack. Because of the range of the Great Club, it actually worked out sometimes, and here I used the hyper armor for that to deliver another kill. So the charged heavy does have a little bit of hyper armor. I am running a high poise build, which is also useful in moments like that, and it's enough to take care of the Bloodhound Fang user. So you know, the variety of this moveset is, you know, it's kind of like different levels of slowness to your attacks. I would say the jumping heavy is going to be probably your fastest attack, but it's also pretty easy to just kind of get out of the way of. So just, you know, not only going for R1s is going to be important for sure. So we do have, I think, a lot of aggression from these players, and they don't really have the burst damage necessary to take us both on simultaneously, and they don't actually deliver enough poise damage either. So the Bloodhound Fang Ash of War would stun lock us, but it's not, you know, going to be something they can deliver consistently enough to, you know, poise break us and keep us both back. So I think either more coordinated attacks on their end would have been beneficial, or, you know, just I think, yeah, more coordinated attacks would have been probably the way to go. All right, next up for our 2v2s, we're going to have a duo that was definitely more formidable than the previous group. We have an overleveled Phantom. You can tell that because they have a little icon next to their name, which indicates that they're being downscaled. So that's something you'll frequently see within the context of team arenas where you're using a password, which Iced and I were. And we have the overleveled Phantom using Rivers of Blood, as well as either the Hand of Melania or the Nagakiba, long-range katana for sure. And we also have another player that's using the Bolt of Grandsax and I believe another spear setup. So these two are definitely more along the lines of meta and players that we need to look out for. I would say Iced is dealing with probably the more challenging player. Rivers of Blood can do a lot of damage, especially on an overleveled Phantom, but the dual spear setup is a strong counter to the Great Club, which is slow and kind of predictable. So Ice did a good job of kind of staying alive while that pressure is being applied by the dual spear user, and then I was able to finish off my opponent and kind of help out a little bit. And then here you can see Ice is able to land a jumping attack on the Rivers of Blood user, and that ends up, you know, taking a chunk of health out of their HP bar. So that was definitely nice. Here, I think there was a little bit of a lack of coordination. Ice was low on health, so I think he was hoping to get a quick kill on the Rivers of Blood user and also help me out a little bit. Unfortunately, Bolt of Grand Sacks came in and got me, so I should have been kind of keeping a better eye out for that player because I did know they have that Ash of War. So ultimately, Iced was not able to get another flask just because I had taken a previous kill, and you do get an extra flask every time you get a kill. So that meant his health stayed pretty low, and eventually he did respawn, and he's kind of sticking with the Bolt of Grand Sacks player, and I'm sticking with the Rivers of Blood player. We didn't have mics or anything during this, so we weren't like communicating about, you know, who was going to be taking which player. It just kind of all happened fairly organically, which I also kind of enjoyed. It was, you know, you don't need constant communication to be effective in 2v2s. You can kind of like just synergize with your teammate and just kind of, you know, see how they're approaching their fight and either mirror that or complement that. So I did switch over to the Stone Club, and in moments when I felt like our opponents were maybe using a little bit more of a meta setup, or we just needed to be a little bit more aggressive, I would frequently switch over to the Stone Clubs. The Great Clubs are definitely fun and can deliver a lot of damage, but the Stone Clubs, I think, are slightly better as a pressuring tool, and given the poise breakpoints of our opponents, I was definitely able to kind of utilize some R1 spam effectively. Here I managed to get a parry and riposte with almost no HP left, so that was a pretty nice moment there, and just something that worked out in the context of just being aware of how much health I have and how much they were gonna, how much damage they were gonna deliver. So Ice has switched over to the Great Club poke, and I think that was kind of in the similar vein as me switching over to the Stone Club, where just regular movesets with the Great Club were not going to be super effective. So we needed to kind of coordinate a little bit and just use kind of the maximum damage output we could get with our builds respectively, since our opponents were using kind of such meta-based builds. So you can see we've kind of got them on the back foot at this point. They're going for Lightning Ram, which is a pretty dangerous Ash of War if you kind of get things rolling with it. But I was able to land a jumping attack on that player and, you know, take them out. And then here we've kind of got them in that slow respawn, just, you know, take one player out before the other one respawns kind of rhythm, which ends up being very, very useful throughout many of these invasions, or 2v2s. Sorry, it's going to take me a minute to get used to not just talking about invasions exclusively. One thing that I did want to mention real quick is that right now invasions have their compass broken, which is why you're going to see more arena content from me. I don't have plans to change up my build showcases too much. I do want to, you know, do many more invasions, but I just wanted to mention that real quick while invasions were on the top of my mind. But coming back into this arena, we do have, you know, I think less coordination now between our two opponents, and maybe a little bit of tilt from our opponents as well. I think we're playing a little bit more patiently, and I think at this point they have kind of gotten aggressive and were kind of annoyed with us, and that can definitely be a detriment to their play style, and we ultimately come out with the W. So, you know, Great Clubs are a little bit memey, but you can definitely face very strong opponents with them and still come out on top. So that's kind of what I wanted to demonstrate with that particular 2v2. So next up we have another 2v2, and this involves a player with, I believe, Moonveil and some sorceries that they're going to be relying on. And out of the gate, we were able to get a quick kill. So that was pretty nice in terms of shifting the balance in our favor. We also have another kind of high poise player that we're able to just kind of chase down effectively with the Giant Club, or yeah, Great Club moveset. I'm not able to land any attacks on that other player, so I go for Giant Land and then switch back to my own opponent, who is probably the weaker of the two. They, at least until they start using Moonveil, they didn't start out too strong, and I'm not sure if they wanted to use Moonveil too much, but once they pull it out, you can see that they're doing, you know, close to half my health. So that's going to be something I need to be aware of, and also I'm going to have to keep an eye on my stamina bar. The thing that I don't want to happen is for me to go and attack, run out of stamina in that moment, and then get Moonveiled and not be able to roll because I have no stamina. So I almost managed to kill the other opponent there and go for some quick fan daggers, hoping that I'll be able to get rid of that last HP. And here I just get stun locked by the Glintstone Phalanx coming from one of the phantoms, and then once I'm kind of stun locked in that animation there, I'm able to get hit by the heavy thrusting sword. So the heavy thrusting sword player was definitely kind of at the ready to help out their opponent. Here I know that I'm going to be able to use some of the hyper armor with my weapon and get some trades in that will be beneficial to me. So I know that the heavy thrusting sword playstyle is very aggressive. Right there I went for an R2 followed up by an an R1 followed up by an R2, and I think that light attack to heavy attack combo can be really nice, especially if you get the timing down with how long you charge it. The charged heavy just can come out with so much damage and has so much range. That was definitely a tactic that I really liked. So I know I've mentioned that before, but I just wanted to bring it up again in that moment to kind of demonstrate its utility. And then we do have kind of the setup where we're able to 2v1 for a little while, and Ice is doing a good job of taking some beneficial trades with the heavy thrusting sword player, and now they're starting to play a little bit more passively. He does a good job of using Giant Land to apply additional pressure, which gets this player with the heavy thrusting sword rolling, and once the player is rolling, I'm able to land a jumping attack there. So that's one of the best parts about Giant Land, I think, is that it does send those projectiles at your opponents, and while the projectiles are unlikely to hit if your opponent is doing well, I would think that the kind of temptation to roll away from them is a great way to get some roll catches with the jumping attack. I do switch over to the Stone Club and the Parry Shield and manage to get a quick parry and riposte on this player that's now using the Nagakiba. So definitely a strong weapon to look out for. The heavy thrusting sword, I guess, wasn't really working for them, and I think they wanted to have the burst damage that comes with Unsheath. But between kind of both of us pressuring these opponents, they kind of got on the back foot, I felt like, and then continued to stay on the back foot, just given the amount of pressure that was coming their way. So yeah, I would say like resetting to neutral within the context of a 2v1 is really a bad move. As long as you can continue pressure and manage your stamina, you know, everything that you can do to just like keep your opponent kind of on their back foot is going to be important. So whether it's using consumables like pots or Ashes of War like Giant Land, it's always going to kind of, you know, your opponents are going to be distracted by the kind of pressure that's coming from two different sources. So I think, you know, that was one reason Ice and I synergized so well within the context of the arena, is just both of us were always looking for opportunities to either apply pressure or add some extra damage. So I think, you know, the Giant Club and the Great Club are more representative of just, you know, what good mechanics can do within the context of the arena. And I think both of us had been seeing a lot of arena content that was very much set up around meta-based builds, or just like absolutely crushing your opponents with the best you could use. So that was something that I think both of us wanted to demonstrate within our you know, respective videos here, is just that the arena is kind of a place to have fun. Elden Ring has so many different options for weapons, and if you can utilize, you know, stuff that's not just dual spears or Moonveil or Rivers of Blood, you can still have a lot of fun, and you'll also get a lot better at the game. You'll have to be reacting much more to your opponent's playstyle. You'll have to be varying up your moveset. You'll have to just kind of diversify your skill set within the context of PvP. And I think that's what this is really about. It's like, you know, we're intentionally putting ourselves at a disadvantage to some extent with the weapons we're using, but in doing so, getting to kind of incorporate more variety and just also have like a lot of fun. Like I was feeling a little burnt out within the context of the arena, just playing free-for-alls and getting a lot of spam of just, you know, Blasphemous Blade or just different Ashes of War that, you know, take up a lot of space, and you can just kind of continuously send at people's just, you know, one-on-one fights and grab an easy kill. So, you know, doing a team battle where we both had kind of silly weapons, and, you know, we're both obviously trying, like, we want to win and want to demonstrate the utility of these weapons, but we also did want to have fun, and I felt like I hadn't laughed playing Elden Ring so hard in a long time, if ever. So, you know, I hope kind of the spirit of this showcase comes through, and that it makes sense why we're doing this, and just I hope that other people kind of have a similar approach when they come into the arena too. Like, winning is great, but I think having fun is, you know, it's the reason to play a video game. So this maybe got a little bit off topic, and it became more about, you know, what what is funny. Speaking of which, right there, Iced just landed a jumping attack which knocked my opponent out of the riposte animation, and so they ended up taking both of the riposte damage and the jumping attack damage. So that was something I'd never seen before, kind of an odd moment. But yeah, I mean, just stuff like that will happen, and it makes this game so much fun. So back to the arena, we have a decent lead, I feel. I'm not sure if either of us have died yet, so up potentially 3-0. And both of our opponents are now once again on their back foot, where one is pretty low on health, and they're not really coordinating too well. I do manage to land a running light attack with the Great Club that kind of knocks my opponent out of the air, which definitely feels pretty good in those moments. I definitely enjoy that type of stuff. They go for Dragon Breath, but I do have the poise to kind of deliver another jumping attack. The Great Club is nice because it has so much range that, you know, going for jumping attacks when somebody's using Dragon Breath, even if they've jumped first, you can still land your attack and knock them out of the air. So eventually I do go for a hyper armor trade there with the Great Club, and it ends up being enough to deliver kind of the final blow. I think being aware of how much damage you're going to be outputting and when you're going to be able to win trades is really important when using this particular moveset. I do go for a Rancor Pot there, and that was something I experimented with a little bit throughout this showcase. I thought it might be a decent way to get a roll catch, you know, have them roll away from the kind of spirits that were coming their way, and then, you know, grab a jumping attack or something. It didn't end up being too successful, but I do think it's worth, you know, trying some of the different consumables in different situations. I found Albinauric Pots to really be useful when you're using like a poison build. The kind of complementary nature of roped volcano pots with freezing pots can be really good if you want to deliver frostbite damage repeatedly. You can kind of frostbite your opponent with a freezing pot and then unfrostbite them with the roped volcano pot, and just kind of continue that until you you know, have depleted all their health. So especially with somebody with high HP, I think freezing does deliver a flat percentage of their HP with each frost proc. So it can be a nice way to get high HP on, or high damage on somebody with high HP. So we kind of continue to just you know, deliver attacks that are, I don't know, pretty devastating. The stun lock chains that you can get from these different weapons are hard to deal with for sure, and we are kind of just kind of keeping them on the back foot the whole time. So it's another successful one there, just 7 kills, but I'm not sure how many deaths between us. I don't think it was too many. Next up, we do have some pretty formidable foes. We have somebody with the Nagakiba who's light rolling, and that's going to be something that's difficult to deal with these builds, because they're pretty easily able to light roll out of range of our roll catches. So I think kind of ganging up on that player for a second there with the Nagakiba and light rolling was probably a good good way to go. Iced and I have now kind of split up. The pressure was coming in from the other opponent here, and I felt like I needed to kind of stick with them. I could definitely trust Ice to kind of take care of the other opponent, or at least deliver a decent amount of damage, and there we do kind of both end up killing our respective opponents at a similar time, so we come over to vibe with our great clubs. So definitely important to keep morale high, you know, gotta be you know, just supporting each other throughout these fights. I think it's important, so you'll definitely see that throughout some of these, and you probably have seen that throughout. So we do have somebody going for Giant's Flame Take Thee, excuse me, and that's not a bad move to go for that in arenas. You know, it has a big splash damage and is pretty easy to just kind of take people out, especially if you're free aiming. It can be hard to predict when that's going to land exactly. So fortunately, they weren't able to deliver too much damage with it. It's something that takes a little bit of time to cast, so applying continuous pressure is going to be useful. I try to just get some chip damage with Thunderbolt while Iced is going after them, but then the other opponent does come in, so my attention is kind of diverted again. They've started using the double slash Ash of War, which on the Navakiba is extremely strong. It takes up so much space, so you really have to be aware of it. And they also are running regen, which is just something I am trying to be aware of. I noticed they pulled out their buckler, so I assumed they were going to go for some parries, which did open them up to a backstab, which you know, is something to be aware of. If you can kind of get that backstab off their parry attempt, it's a good way to discourage parries and get some burst damage. And then there I am able to help Iced out with just a Thunderbolt Ash of War. So not a bad moment there, and we are able to get a little bit of time with a 2v1 situation. So the light rolling player here is, you know, doing a pretty good job of delivering damage. I accidentally unequipped my weapon there when trying to go for a weapon swap, so fortunately I was able to correct that pretty quick, but definitely something you want to look out for. Given kind of the aggressive play of the Nagakiba and just the potential damage output, I do switch over to Flaming Strike, which I think is a pretty good counter to something like this. They managed to get quite a bit of damage off on me, but I do start going pretty aggressively with the light attacks with the Stone Club, and I think that can really catch people off guard. It does a lot of poise damage and delivers a lot of damage pretty quickly. So getting aggressive when you're expecting them to be aggressive can sometimes be a way to stay alive. And so in that circumstance, I was very low on health, managed to deliver 3 hits in pretty quick succession that ended up killing my opponent, and then I got some more Estus back. So I'm, you know, pretty low on health overall. I just took a pretty bad trade there that really wasn't worth it. And so at this point, I kind of know that I'm going to be dying soon, but if I can deliver, you know, a couple hits just to lower the HP of my opponent, that'll be probably the best I can do. So understanding when you are probably going to die in the arena is pretty helpful in terms of adjusting your strategy there. I was hoping to get a backstab, but, you know, only got the first part of it, and then did die from the third slash of the second part of double slash. So we both end up dying in that moment. I think we had both been kind of running on empty in terms of HP and Estus. So it was not bad for us really to die at similar times. I think that is kind of what you can hope for, because then you both respawn at the same time and nobody ends up fighting 2 people by themselves for too long. There I went for a predictive parry that was a little bit bold. I'm not sure if I was actually going for an Ash of War but didn't have my weapon two-handed or what, but not sure if it was really necessary. I do get a jumping attack and then the first part of Flaming Strike as my opponent goes for another parry. I think they definitely wanted to land a parry, and here was one of my favorite parts of the entire showcase. I landed a parry and Ice lands a backstab at the very end of the fight. But those are all the 2v2s we have for you today. I hope you enjoyed, and definitely check out the complimentary video that Ice did on his channel about this. As always, if you made it this far, I just wanted to say thanks so much for watching. Really appreciate everybody's support. Also, if you have any feedback about this particular video, the intro is something that I just kind of had some fun with, and I'm not sure it'll be on every one of my videos, but it was definitely a lot of fun to make and was a little bit more complimentary of the style that Iced Estus does. So yeah, if you have feedback on that, definitely let me know. If you have any other recommendations for builds you'd like to see, let me know. And that's all I got, and I hope you have a good one.